Assalamu alaikum, I'm Dr. Amna and welcome to the Health and Fitness Show on Inspire FM. We are broadcasting from our podcast studio here in Luton. So every month I invite my colleagues and friends to join me. To talk to me about a wide range of health related topics over the weeks. And I'd really love to hear from you guys as the listeners about what you would like us to cover. So please do get in touch and let us know of any questions. And you can do this via the Inspire FM Instagram page or my Instagram at Dr. Amna GP. You can also WhatsApp us on 0777 948 1822. Unfortunately, we can't give out any specific medical advice. This is something that you have to see your own GP for, but we will aim for every show to let you know one thing that you can do to improve your health and fitness, inshallah, and maybe some things to think about. So today we're going to be thinking about medicines, and sometimes medicines feel like it's a simple answer or solution for all things. You know, you have a problem, you go get a prescription and everything is much better, isn't it? Well, that's not really the way that I practice in my GP surgery. And I have two pharmacists here with me today who are hopefully going to be telling us about why maybe medicines are not always enough to make us feel better. So I'm going to introduce our two guests. So Aberdeen and Halimah are two local pharmacists working at the L&D hospital. Thank you for joining me today.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. So why don't you start off by telling us your name and your job role, because you have slightly different job roles, even though you're both pharmacists, and we'll go from there.
So my name is Aberdeen.
Hello.
And I am a specialist paediatric pharmacist.
Oh.
So I work mainly on the paediatric and the neonatal wards, the neonatal intensive care unit. And my role is mainly on the wards and dealing with stuff outside of the wards as well. Mm-hmm. Clinical queries and guidelines, protocols, prescriptions, all of that stuff.
Excellent. And I think a lot of us maybe don't think about paediatric pharmacy. So essentially that's just children's pharmacy, isn't it? And neonatals, very, very little babies. But some babies and children can be really, really sick and have lots of medications, both in hospital and in the community. And it's really important that that's something that, you know, we take into account, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So a lot of people don't see pharmacists as being healthcare professionals that can specialise. So there are loads of specialist pharmacists, and where I have specialised is paediatrics, which is still quite general. But as you said, a lot of people don't realise that children are very sick and children can be very sick, and there is a specialism and there is a need to cater to these children. And my role is basically to deal with that in the medicinal or the pharmaceutical aspect, and using pharmaceutical products to make them better.
Excellent. Wow. And have you ever worked, so normally if I kind of said to somebody who is non-medical or pharmacist, they would say, oh yeah, you know, in a pharmacy on the high street. Have you ever worked in a pharmacy?
So I have. I did so as a pharmacist, we would do a training year called a pre-registration year. So I did my training year in community, and I also still locum in community pharmacy. Yeah. And when we mean community, we mean sort of your Boots, your Lloyds, your general pharmacy that you'll go to.
Just other, you know, any random generic pharmacy shop pharmacy. on your high street. Yes, exactly.
Yes. So a lot of people have that brand or that image of that's what a pharmacist is. They take a medicine off the shelf, put a label on it and hand it out. That is a generic view, but not necessarily the correct view or a broad view of what we do.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you a little bit later about exactly what it is you do and what things you know, parents listening can take away from your experience. So thank you. My second guest was actually recently named the Masked Angel in Luton at the Community Awards 2022. And who's also a pharmacist at the L&D. So Halimah, assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining us.
Walaikum salam. So my name is Halimah. I'm currently a senior rotational pharmacist at the L&D, which currently means I rotate across different specialties every 9 months. Okay. And that's just to like broaden our experience, etc. So right now I'm in surgery / acute medicine, and I kind of deal with like patient discharges, counselling, any kind of like medicine queries on the wards as well.
So that's basically when people are ready to go home,
Yes.
making sure that they have all the right
Yes,
medications and
yes.
that they know what and how to take it. Okay.
Yes, and if there's any changes in their medications, anything that's new, anything that's newly started, and also we check for if there's any interactions, etc.
Yeah. So that's, I think, a really important point for kind of listeners to be aware of, that actually this service is available.
Yeah.
You know, there are people like you that are very highly trained working in the hospital alongside the wards. So it's important when you're going home, if you've been in hospital for any length of time and you have any medications, firstly to tell the pharmacists about that, make sure that they're aware, but also that, you know, you can have a chat to them about it afterwards to know how you take it.
Yeah, and it's not just what medications you're taking, it's are you taking it appropriately? It's how you're taking it, because you might be told by the GP to take it 3 times a day, but you're only taking it once a day. So it can make an impact.
And that's very important. But I guess, what about with any kind of changes? Because obviously now we're in Ramadan, and a lot of people who are on regular medications maybe aren't able to take them at the times that they normally would. Some people are making some changes, and hopefully, inshallah, they would have heard our shows from a couple of weeks ago before Ramadan, and in plenty of time they have spoken to their GP and made the safe
the right
amendments.
decisions.
I hope so.
But if you haven't had that, and you know, we're not taking medications at the right time, what kind of things do we need to be doing?
I think it really depends on each person individually. Some medications, it's okay to take it earlier in the day, so like around suhoor and then again in iftar, but other medications might need to be timed, and so it's better to like have that discussion with your doctor or pharmacist or so on.
So it's not just the GP. I know in my GP surgery, I work at a couple of different surgeries, and you know, some of them have whole teams of pharmacists that do you know, that exact job, kind of making sure that patients know exactly when they can take their medications. And I think something that people always ask me, and to be honest, I never really have a very good answer, is whether I should take something with food, after food, before food, and does it make a difference? So what are your thoughts about that?
So it can make a difference.
Yes.
There are some medications that are required to be taken with food.
Right.
So, for example, ibuprofen, it's required to be taken with food because it can irritate your stomach as a side effect. So we encourage you. And with those medications, on the label, it will say take with a meal or after a meal, or with food after food.
Yes.
Some medications need to be taken with food because it increases the amount of medication that your body actually absorbs. So there's a reason why. If the medication doesn't specifically say to take with food, you don't need to. So there's always labels, there's always advice on how to take the medication.
And there's some medications like nystatin, which is used for an oral thrush. You take it after food because you ideally don't want the food to rub off the medicine.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So even if that's not something that your doctor has specifically said, then speaking to the pharmacist when you're picking it up, and reading the box.
The label.
What about those who can't read English? Because those are, I think, kind of my worry. That if I'm, you know, obviously if somebody has asked me, if I've remembered to tell them, then, you know, you make sure that they're understanding that. But otherwise, kind of just giving a box out. Where can people go for more information to find out how they should be taking it? Or is the best thing to have a one-to-one discussion? Can they walk into any pharmacy, for example?
I think there's 2 sides to it. So I think there are services that do translations of labels. So definitely where we work, we have that service.
Have that service,
So
at the hospital.
At the hospital,
it means that everyone has equal access to the same information.
So you can ask for a label in a specific language.
Absolutely.
And we have translator services too.
Yes, we do.
Amazing.
Yes.
So you can get counselling in a specific language.
Right. And when we say counselling, because I know people think of counselling and they think of, you know, going to speak to a therapist. When we say counselling in the context of medications, we mean, you know, spending some time understanding what that medication is for, how to take it, how it interacts with everything, when to take it.
But also
how long to take it for if it's an antibiotic.
Yes, very true.
But
very
also
true.
giving the patient more information on what this medication is, because there are some medications where if you don't take the medication, it can lead to some, not harm, but it might not do
sometimes harm.
Sometimes harm, and
sometimes,
sometimes it
yeah.
might not do what it's intended to do.
Yeah.
So the pharmacist will give you information on that medication, what it's for, why you're using it, why the doctor's prescribed it. And that is also included with counselling, and it helps with medication adherence as well.
Yeah.
So by adherence, we mean how well they
Yes,
kind of continue
you
to take
take
it.
it, yeah.
Yes.
Because some people don't like to take medication.
Very
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even me as a pharmacist, sometimes I don't like to take medications. So I think it's generic across
Yeah.
across all
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes pharmacists are just as bad.
Yeah, sometimes they're just as
Just as
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Everyone can,
Yeah.
can be just as bad. I don't particularly like going to see my doctor or my dentist, even
Yeah.
though I
But
kind of
you know
need
you
to.
have
But you
to.
know-
Exactly.
And Googling your symptoms.
Yeah.
That's
Don't do
the
that.
worst.
Yeah.
The worst.
Always seek medical
Yes.
professional advice.
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any particular kind of good, reliable, Googleable websites for medication?
The NHS,
choices.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think that's the best source to use, if anything. Like, I know you shouldn't really Google your symptoms, but if you were to look at, what do I do next? I've got a temperature, I've got so-and-so. That's the best source to use because it tells you if I should call 111,
Yeah.
if I should go to A&E, because you know how busy A&E is. You don't want to go unless you need to.
Yeah.
And that kind of like pinpoints you in the right direction as well.
Yeah. And a lot of times now we are signposting to a pharmacist.
Yes.
Yes.
So it may be
Yeah.
that you call your GP for an appointment, but actually, there are specific triages and
Yeah.
specific questions that have been put in place across the country that say, actually, this is something that a pharmacist can deal with,
Yeah.
and they can give you the appropriate medication that
Yeah.
you need and
Yeah.
do all of that counselling and
And
everything else.
sometimes people don't realise a lot of pharmacists are prescribers now, so they can prescribe antibiotics and so on if needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely pharmacy has been promoted in
Yeah.
a positive light. So
Yeah.
as you say, a lot of the times with GPs, they'll say go to your pharmacist because for certain minor ailments that they call it, so sort of issues that are not necessarily severe enough to require a prescription
Yeah.
can be dealt with in the pharmacy. So that's coughs, colds,
Yeah.
headaches, scabies, lice, all of those kind of things. You can go to your pharmacist. So definitely well equipped.
Yeah. And I think it's maybe what I kind of see in my practice now, that things that maybe my grandma would know how to treat,
Yeah.
or my mum, if I asked her, or her mum or their mum, and generations, and because now everyone is so busy. And they haven't really come into contact with those things. And, if you've not come into contact with how to deal with head lice, like you say, you're kind of like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Do I need medicine? And, medicine is sometimes automatically thought of as your doctor, but actually, your pharmacists are really well placed to have that discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So we were talking about reasons why people don't want to take medicines. So what are some of the reasons that you come across, some fears that people have?
The taste for children.
Yeah,
how would you get
adults as well?
How would you get around that? Because actually that's a very common thing. Because I think with tablets,
Yeah.
for me,
A lot of them are bitter.
the solutions or the tablets?
No, the tablets. So
The
you
tablets,
you can
right.
have some tablets that are bitter. So for example,
Okay.
paracetamol. The majority of that tablet is paracetamol and it tastes bitter, and it's going to be very difficult to get that in a child. So they will have like solutions or liquids, and they might have flavouring, like a strawberry flavour or banana flavour.
People don't like the banana. Is that,
Really?
or is it that people
They
like the
love
banana?
the banana.
Okay, people love the banana. Which one do they not like?
I don't like banana, but a lot of them do like the banana flavours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
So-
I maybe personally that just brought back traumatic kind of yellow substances as a child.
I don't
Like,
think I liked banana either.
I don't think
wasn't-
I like
I'm
the
not a fan of
banana.
bananas,
Yeah.
no.
So we're all anti-banana.
We're all
Anti-banana.
Anti-banana.
Yes.
Not as a fruit or as a healthy lifestyle choice. That's great. I love bananas.
But banana flavour.
Banana flavouring,
Yeah.
not one that I would pick. So, okay, so kids tend to like the banana flavour. And how much is that kind of available in terms of different antibiotics?
So most of your antibiotics are available in a liquid form or a suspension form. Sometimes we do advise, and this is very in rare cases or specialist cases where we will crush a tablet or we will open a capsule, but that should only come under the advice of a pharmacist who has checked the appropriate resource.
Yes.
It shouldn't be done on your own accord. There are other ways to combat taste and stuff. So some tablets are film coated, and film coated just means it's there to mask the taste or the look or something like that. And that would help people to take medications as well.
And back on your point about crushing tablets, we do that for older patients as well, or patients who have swallowing difficulties. And sometimes you can open a capsule and put it in yogurt. But again, it depends on the medication. There's certain medications that are modified release, which we call them, which means it's kind of been tailored to release the drug at a certain time throughout your stomach. Those ones we cannot crush. So it's always important to check that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically the take home from that is there are different ways if you're struggling to take your medication, because that might be a reason why people are just not, they have all the will in the world, but actually the tablet is too big or, it tastes really bitter. To speak to a pharmacist about a different, or maybe a different way of taking the thing that you already have, or maybe a different alternative as well. That's a really good idea. Because I think I've heard this kind of yogurt, I think for children, I think maybe for some asthma medications,
so sometimes the
in a yogurt.
prednisolone, they might crush it and put in some jam or some yogurt.
Okay, excellent.
We do have some ways to help and encourage patients to take their medications.
Excellent. Okay. Now, the other thing is, and this has been in the news quite a lot recently, about specifically around HRT and prepayment certificates, specifically for those women who are eligible for HRT and they can get pay a small amount. But I know for children, obviously, is it up until 18 all prescriptions
So
are
it's
free?
up until 16, and then if you're 17 or 18 and still in education,
full-time education.
Yeah, full-time education, it's free.
Then it's free,
But that does not include things that you can buy over the counter. So, we do, as all of us have a responsibility for the NHS in terms of, paracetamol or
Calpol.
Things that are very available to just buy from your local supermarket for children or for adults. It's sometimes medications are like 20 pence. And nothing else in life is 20p anymore.
Sometimes a prescription costs more than the actual medication.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to talk
about. I really like pharmacists who will identify that and they will say it's cheaper to buy this over the counter than to pay for a prescription. It's a win-win for the patient and the NHS.
Iron tablets are one good example. Like, you can buy it for about £2-3, but the actual prescription itself is much more expensive.
So how much does a prescription cost at the moment?
Oh, it's just gone up.
£9.
I think, is it £9.65?
Wow.
It's gone up don't quote me, but it's about that. And when I started in pharmacy when I was 16, ages ago, it was like £6.35 or something.
I remember it being about £6. Yeah. But unfortunately, we are in a cost of living crisis. The NHS is under a lot of strain. So, costs do rise, and, the production of medicines and getting the medication to you and all of those things. So it's important if, the costs are what it is. We can't really do much about that. But if you are going to the trouble of going to get your prescription, paying for it, that you are actually taking it and are able to take it.
I think it's also worth noting that sometimes payment can be a preventative reason as to why patients don't go and get their medications because the cost is a lot. But I think it's worth noting that there are different ways. For example, you can get a prepayment prescription where you would pay a certain amount and that will cover for either 3, 6 or 12 months worth of medications. And it's actually, I think, double check on the NHS website, but it's worth looking at and seeing actually if I'm on 4 or 5 medications and each of those items are costing nearly 10 quid each time.
Because it's per item. It's not per prescription. If you go to the doctors and, I say you need antibiotics and steroids and an inhaler, that is 3 lots of £10. So that's, nearly £10.
So there are ways, definitely.
And there's also, there are certain conditions which fall under the medical exemption certificate, which means you're entitled to free prescriptions as long as you have that condition. I think, don't quote me, but diabetes might fall fall under it
Yeah.
for
If you're on
certain,
insulin,
if you're on insulin, and that kind of entitles you to free medications throughout, because you're more at risk of catching ill, so it's important to have a look at that, and also like you could be saving a lot if you had that card.
And to my knowledge, you're not able to backdate that, so I don't think you can claim costs back from the NHS if you've already paid it.
Sometimes you can. I think
sometimes
there is a blue form that I remember from community, and if you have the receipt, so it's not like 2 years worth of medication. But if at the time that you've come into the pharmacy,
recently,
if you come into the pharmacy
while it's being processed,
yes, exactly,
that needs your GP to fill it out, so you can go and speak to either your community pharmacist to get a copy, or the pharmacist at your GP practice if you have a dispensary, or just reception, and say, I think I'm eligible for medical exemption, I've had a look online.
Or you can print it online and then take it to the
or
surgery
you could print it online, exactly.
So many options.
And then your GP just checks your medical record to make sure you have one of the eligible conditions, and it's not means tested. By that we mean it doesn't matter if you're on benefits or if you're in education. It's for anybody with those medical conditions, and it means that you don't have to pay for any of your prescriptions that you have to pay, that you would otherwise pay for. So that's a really useful thing to know. So if either you think you may have like a chronic condition, and it's not all conditions, unfortunately, it's worth speaking to, your GP, or having a look online on the NHS website to see if you're eligible for that, speaking to your GP. And if you're not eligible, then something like the prepayment certificate that we've just talked about, where you pay something around £100-ish, or it depends on how long you do it for, but it may be much more cost effective, especially if you're kind of on like 8, 9, 10 medications. Now let's move on to that. You worked with kind of more older patients, so we've got the really young people and the more older, more mature patients who may be on quite a lot of medications. And that's something called polypharmacy. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So it's a term used to describe when patients are on multiple medications. Now, part of our role as pharmacists is to obviously review medications, and sometimes something that might have been appropriate for you 5 years ago, you might not need it anymore. So we use the term deprescribing to kind of say you don't need that prescription anymore. So that's sometimes the case for statins with older patients. So if you're on simvastatin or torvastatin, you might not need it when you're like probably 90 or so. So it's important to like have it reviewed by the pharmacist or your doctor or so on.
But there's also like sometimes you'll find that maybe a patient might come into, for example, to the GP and might complain of like constipation. And you might prescribe something for constipation, but maybe a pharmacist hasn't reviewed and realised that they're taking codeine regularly. And so medications can be prescribed because of a side effect of another medication. So part of our role in terms of medicines optimization is to see what medications they're taking, and can we get rid of some? Do they need any? And that's definitely more appropriate in the elderly patients where polypharmacy does exist.
So really have a conversation with somebody.
Absolutely.
Especially if that's preventing you from taking your medications, if you're feeling overwhelmed or so.
So I know in our GP practice, every couple of months we undertake medication reviews. For some patients, yearly we will invite you in for a full medication review that's probably face to face. We'll do your blood pressure, check your height and your weight, check your blood test. Essentially. But I think some patients can be quite scared of that. And kind of what it might mean. But you guys have just explained that actually it might be that you don't need to be taking some medications. Some medications may be giving you more side effects. And
I think there's always a worry that I'll end up having more medications. That's not always the case.
We don't want people to be on more medications.
It's actually worse for us, if anything. And the more medications you're on, the more likely you might end up having interactions with something else, or you might miss it and forget to mention it.
So it is really important to go for that medication review and just have a chat and just make sure that the things that you're taking you still need to take. Like you said, it may be that we can take something off because actually you don't need it anymore, or you started on a tablet, you're not really sure what it's for, and you've been having it regularly because it's on your repeat medicines, and actually it was for a pain that you had that is no longer there. But actually it's causing you, like you said, the constipation. So it's putting all of those things together, and that's what the pharmacists can do really well.
Oh, just to add to that, there's so why people might not take medications is because you might not see the benefit. So that's with blood pressure medications. Quite often, a lot of patients or a lot of us don't see that our blood pressure is high, so we might not take it.
It's called the silent killer, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's so important because it could lead to so many other conditions in the long run if it's not treated. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And blood pressure is a really, really big topic.
Very common as well.
It's very, very common in our communities, and it's linked to lots of other different different conditions. And I know any time we've spoken about Ramadan, we've spoken about blood pressure and the risks and what things it's interacting, it's related with. But we're coming up to the end of the first half of our show. So what we'll do is we will pick it up after the break, inshallah, where we are talking about medications today and if they are enough to make us feel better, or if there are other things that we need to be doing. So we'll join you. Please join us again in a couple of minutes after the break.
رمضان يا حبيب رمضان Assalamu alaikum, listeners, and welcome to the Sehri transmission. I pray you are enjoying this blessed time of Sehri, inshallah ta'ala.
This Ramadan, tune in to Inspire FM and join us as we journey to complete the Quran in the holy month of Ramadan. Tune in every day in Ramadan to listen to and follow along with recitations from world-renowned sheikhs.
Your salah may be done, but if you want to achieve the broader benefits of that beautiful salah, do it as an honor. Oh Allah, I love you. I'm going to fulfill this salah because I want to do it for your sake. You've given me so much, Ya Allah.
The question of the day is, which is the shortest surah in the Quran? Which is the shortest surah in the Quran? If you think you know the answer, get texting in.
Ramadan, Ramadan, Ramadan ya Habib.
Yasin wal Quran al-Hakim.
The first messenger of Allah and the implications of that. Khadija radiallahu anha, the first believer in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the implications of that.
Ramadan, Ramadan.
These topics can transform people's lives and really, really help people to flourish in their lives.
This Ramadan, tune in to the Iftar show every evening with Hafiz Shaban. End your day with spiritual nourishment as we share Ramadan reflections and reminders, Iman boosters, and interviews to help you make the most of this blessed month.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ramadan, Ramadan, Ramadan ya Habib, Ramadan, Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Health and Fitness Show on Inspire FM. I'm Dr. Amna, and before the break I was talking to Ambreen and Halimah, our two local pharmacists, talking about are medicines enough to make us feel better. Now remember, you can catch up on the show. We're pre-recording this as a podcast in our not so new podcast studio, but it's still new and shiny, so I'm still excited about it. If you have any questions or any thoughts about any future shows that you would like us to do, then please also get in touch, and you can WhatsApp your questions on 0777 948 1822. Now, as we've mentioned already, unfortunately we can't give out any specific medical advice, but we have been talking kind of generically about some things that you might want to consider and where to get help via the NHS in different ways, and not just with your GP or A&E, but from our lovely local pharmacists, as we've just heard. So please do take that on board. So just before the break, we were talking about blood pressure. Which is something that is very, very common in all of our communities, and something that is a silent killer, as you guys were saying, because it's linked to so many different conditions, with increase in weight, increase in things and risk factors like diabetes. It can put you at risk of things like stroke and really disabling conditions. And it's a silent killer because you don't feel it. So if you don't feel something and you feel very, very well, you're probably more likely to ignore it. So why do you guys think that that's not something people should be doing?
It's not, if you don't feel, for example, with hypertension,
so hypertension being blood pressure.
Yes, high blood pressure. A lot of the time they say you won't notice that your blood pressure is very high, and when you first get symptoms of that, it's off the chart, essentially. And that might be symptoms like a headache or something. So if your GP or your doctor prescribes medications for high blood pressure, it's actually very, very important to take them. As you said, it can predispose you, or high blood pressure can predispose you to things like diabetes and stroke. So in not taking them, and you might not feel the symptoms, you might not see that that condition is worsening and getting to a point where you can be predisposed to those kind of conditions.
But from my point of view as a GP, I'm not even thinking, you're thinking about the medication side as a pharmacist. I'm thinking one step before them, because the amount of time I spend asking patients to come in to do their blood pressure, or kind of record it, and they say, well, I've never been asked this before, or, but I don't have blood pressure problems. Well, that's kind of exactly why. Because
you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know. And also, if you've never checked, how would you know if that, if you do have something or not? And sometimes with the NHS you have various NHS health checks, with which kind of get triggered at certain ages. So I say to people, well, you were never 50 before, you're 50 now. So therefore we need to check you for things like diabetes or blood pressure or anything else.
And the older you get, the more at risk of different conditions you're going to be. You're going to have.
Exactly. Also, what about kind of your family history? So people tend to worry more if a lot of their family has things like diabetes or blood pressure or things like that. So that's really important that we know that as health professionals. And you will be asked, if you go into a pharmacist, into a pharmacy. So what are the ways that people can take their blood pressure?
So there are blood pressure monitors. Which you can buy in a community pharmacy. And what they will
online,
do, or online,
a very fast website that will come to you the next day. I always tell people,
and the automatic ones are very easy to use.
So you would pop. I mean, you would be able to explain this more elaborately, but you'd pop it on your arm, and it's pretty much simply just a button, and it will do all the work, and it will give you your blood pressure reading. It will give you your pulse or your heart rate as well, and a lot of the times it will tell you what is okay, what is a little bit high, and what is very high. And obviously that's going to be...
And when to seek medical advice.
And it's going to be different for different ages, or if you have, for example, diabetes. But essentially, that's a good way to be able to check and to monitor your blood pressure if it is high.
Yeah, I have heard of those ones that apparently they light up different colours.
Yes.
The one that I have is not that fancy, but... and take a couple of readings. So I always tell people to kind of be nice and relaxed. Don't do it when you're really stressed and you're running around and you go into a doctor's appointment and you're literally rushing.
That's the worst time
to do it. That is the worst time to take your blood pressure.
It's
you need to be seated, calm, relaxed, feet on the ground.
Feet on the ground is good.
Arm out, rested with your palm up.
Nothing obstructing.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally wear a t-shirt or something.
And I always say take it 3 times and write down only the lowest reading. So because inevitably your blood pressure will come down. As you relax, if we sat here and just did a few minutes, we've had a long, hard day. I think Ambreen's been the only one at work today, but we've all had a long hard day. Everyone, life is stressful. And actually just those few minutes of, we've talked a lot on this show before about kind of mindfulness and taking some time.
Yeah.
And you'll feel that your heart rate drops. Your blood pressure should drop with that. And if you have true high blood pressure, true hypertension, then it will not go beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
No matter how much you relax, So don't be concerned. People get concerned and they say, oh, but it was very high, so, I need you to see this number. Well, actually, I want to see the lowest number, lowest of 3 readings. If you can, twice a day. I say maybe keep it by your bed. And, first thing in the morning, unless you're woken up by, screaming kids, in which case you're probably not very
relaxed.
calm, not very relaxed at that point. But yeah, and then drop it into your GP. But what if somebody either doesn't have the means to, doesn't want to do their own blood pressure readings?
So if you can't go to your GP, a lot of community pharmacies do have that service available.
Yes,
Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, so you can pop down to your local pharmacy and ask for a blood pressure check, and most of them should be able to provide that service for you.
For free.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For free, they'll sit you down for that, few minutes.
They'll
do
sit
some
you in a
readings.
separate room and then they'll go through everything with you.
Oh, there we go. If you want a break from life, pop in and get your blood pressure taken.
Yeah,
for
in your lunch
good
break.
few minutes. There we go. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very quick. I think that's what people don't realise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think it's like a whole faff. So if you are popping into your GP and, you're waiting for something, maybe you're waiting to pick up a prescription for something else, then, some GP surgeries will have a machine in reception that you can use. But the good thing about the community pharmacy is... one, it's, probably on the high street, it's probably closer to you than your GP. But also some pharmacists, I know the one that is linked to our surgery does this, where if you are found to have high blood pressure, because of the stress of life, and that it might be that it's just that one-off reading that's high, sometimes they can fit you with a 24-hour blood pressure monitor.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And that will basically have a look at your blood pressure over the period of time, so we're not catching that one moment
where you're really stressed.
Exactly.
Where you're really stressed.
It's sort of like to see how you are over a 24-hour period, which is actually very good.
Yeah.
Very enlightening.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to worry if you do have high blood pressure, because you don't have to be popped onto the first medication as soon as you have one high reading. It doesn't work like that. There'll be we'll suggest lifestyle kind of advice as well to get the readings down, and I think that's something that is taken as measures a lot of the times before even someone's rushed into medications. And I think there's all those self-help tips that you might not be aware of that can really help, like cutting down salt, so under 6 grams a day, exercising.
Well, I'm gonna interrupt you and just stick on the salt bit for now, because we are in Ramadan. A lot of people are fasting at the moment, or if you're not fasting, you're maybe a little bit more aware of what things you're eating. So I know my family, me and my husband don't particularly have a lot of salt. It's not something that we're used to. But I know my siblings do have quite a bit of salt. But in Ramadan, they tend to use much less.
And fried food as well.
Yeah, fried food as well. But because they say, well, actually, I'm going to be more thirsty the next day.
Yeah.
So actually, this is a time where people are reflecting already on what kind of things they're eating, and they're making changes. I know a lot of people this year, I've been seeing a lot of it on Instagram, I don't know if you guys have as well, about coconut water and people drinking a lot of coconut water.
Yeah, I don't know the evidence behind it.
I mean, but I bought some coconut water. I bought some coconut water and I had some yesterday. I feel a bit better today. So, this may be my new thing. And you were mentioning about fried food.
Yes. Yeah, because fried food has a lot of salt in it, especially samosas. And chips, if you put salt in it.
Yeah. But it also has a lot of fat.
Yes.
That's
and
also true.
That's the issue.
But I feel like people crave that a lot in Ramadan. Like a lot of the iftar parties.
Do people crave it, or is it a thing? Well, is it that you're hungry, or is it that it's just that you're ingrained that this is Ramadan food?
Yeah.
That's
So,
true. 'Cause
actually,
it's snacky food that you want to eat on the side of your like main dish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I realised this a few days ago. So obviously we've talked a lot on the show. We've done lots of work about kind of pre-Ramadan preparing and healthy eating and that kind of thing. And what I always say is, it's not about you can never have a samosa again. It's fine.
Yeah.
Samosas are nice.
Yeah.
It's
Tasty.
they are tasty, but you know, it's about in moderation.
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's not making sure that you have samosas every single day. You know, trying different ways of cooking them.
Yeah.
And making sure your diet is balanced. I think
Yes.
that's the
Balanced,
main
exactly.
thing. If you're having too much of anything, it's terrible for you.
Yeah.
Too much water is
Yeah,
not good
yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
about
too much.
making
Like, you
sure-
can't live on just, you know, cucumbers or
Yeah,
celery or
exactly.
whatever.
You know, yeah.
Whatever it is, it's too much of anything
Yeah, so
is
it's making
bad.
sure it's all balanced. So yes, as you said, a samosa is nice. I like fried food, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
Everyone does, but
Yeah.
it's about having it in
You can't
moderation.
eat it every day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And especially not kind of when we're fasting, when you're having that really heavy meal, because
Yeah.
that really limits you in terms of, you know, how you feel, how well you sleep, all of those things. And also, you know, you don't want to feel active. And you were saying about exercise being really important. So, you know, one of the main things that we can look at is how to stay active and be active, or maybe even start becoming active if we haven't, you know, if you haven't been already, even during Ramadan. And some people think that actually, oh, that's not safe at all.
You can gym during Ramadan.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that out there. There's so many times, like, throughout the day where you can gym. Probably, like, I know you should have a balanced sleep cycle.
Yeah.
But in Ramadan, a lot of things fall out of place. And we've just learned to accept that. However, there's measures in place you can put. Like, a lot of my friends kind of exercise just before iftar.
Yeah,
So,
and
like,
lots of
just
people do
after
that.
Asr prayer, just before iftar, so that once they're done, they can quickly go home, sort the food out, and eat straight away. And they're not waiting too long. And actually, my brother likes to exercise before, like, suhoor. So
Okay.
he's up in
Yeah,
the gym
yeah,
at like
yeah,
4 in the morning. So, or he sometimes does it just after he's prayed Fajr.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you know, there's no, I think, like you said, there's no one answer fits all. I think the important thing is don't try anything too massively drastic while you're fasting. And actually, just in life, even if you're not fasting, you know, you don't want to start by saying, okay, well, I've woken up today, I think I'm going to run the marathon. Well, no, that's probably not a very good idea. But maybe, you know, going for a walk, going for a longer walk, you know, helping to digest your food, seeing where you can put those kind of healthy habits in, which will help with, you know, the problems that you may be experiencing or may be at risk of developing with, you know, in our communities, like blood pressure, like diabetes, all the things that come with excess weight.
Yeah, and I think also with exercise, it doesn't have to strictly be gym.
No.
It can be like sort of strolls in the morning or just staying active. And I think there's a lot of things at home as well that one can do that can make them safer. Even things like hoovering, and you're hoovering the whole house, it takes the energy out of you. So I think it's just staying active and you're not sat all day can really make the difference.
Yeah. And it, you know, for those who didn't listen to the last recorded podcast that we did with Dr. Kanal Kathari, who was talking about the smart way of intermittent fasting, and that's nothing related to Ramadan. It's just a process that you can do at any point. And he talked about a lot of the evidence related to kind of things like diabetes and blood pressure and weight, and just having a look at what it is you're doing already, and then how you can just increase it and change it a little bit. So fast for, he said, 1 extra hour before you eat. Now, obviously in Ramadan, we're quite strict.
Quite a long day.
It was quite a long day at the moment, but you know, we're tied down by certain timings. But you know, we're already 13 days in. We're nearly finished,
nearly
and then
halfway.
we're nearly halfway, and then people are going to say, "Oh, well, I'm done with fasting." Well, are you, or actually have you managed to build a bit of a habit that you can take forward? So I will link that show to this post as well, if anyone is interested in that. What about people who are not able to fast in Ramadan?
So there's loads of reasons, as like everyone knows, that you might not be able to fast in Ramadan. So like if you're too young, or if you're too old, or if you have certain condition that could prevent, and that doesn't have to be for the whole month of Ramadan. Sometimes you might have a short-term sickness, like an infection that needs antibiotics. In other cases, you might have like diabetes with insulin, and you are advised not to fast. So there's many reasons why it might not be safe for you to fast as well. And I think it's like we need to accept that it's okay. And I think in the community as well, sometimes people feel guilty.
Yeah. And that can end up with a lot of problems with medications. Now, obviously, we know that little kids can't don't fast and can't fast. But as they get a little bit older, you must see this with maybe those who have diabetes.
Yeah, so I was going to say that advice is also applicable to some kids as well. Because, for example, with type 1 diabetes, it's a lifelong condition. And it's a condition where you will be on insulin from the time you're diagnosed until later on in life. And the same rules apply in the sense that you will be on insulin, and the way it works and the way your body requires insulin, you also require food as well. So in those cases, as you said, certain cases, fasting might not be most appropriate for you.
It can make it worse, if anything, and we don't want to do that.
And like you say, that is something that is maybe not as well understood, unfortunately, still in our communities, even though our religion tells us that if you are sick, this can count as sick, because you can become life-threateningly sick if you don't take your insulin and take food. We have a duty upon ourselves, upon our bodies, to look after our bodies. Fasting is just one aspect of Ramadan,
of so many things that you can do to make up for it. So like it's like going to Taraweeh prayers and making more of an effort to do that, or praying your Sunnah prayers as well. So just doing extras in that, giving back to charity. There's so much you can do, and it doesn't have to be financial payment. Obviously, there is a financial payment that you do to replace it. However, there's so much other things you can do, like volunteering, or like helping your parents, or helping the home with like preparing iftars. So there's a lot of things that you can do to compensate as well.
And I've often found when I'm not fasting, inevitably I probably have a little bit more energy those days. And as women, sometimes it's more women, people, if you are on your period, if you are breastfeeding, if you are pregnant. All of those things, our reasons are very valid reasons to not be fasting. And nobody is saying go get a huge meal, put it out on your main dining room table and say, well, you know what, guys, I'm not fasting, I'm going to eat all of this in front of you. Still be socially acceptable.
Why you're not fasting. If
there's
you're
a
on
reason.
your period, or if you're like breastfeeding, you're going to be tired. And there's reasons why you're not fasting. So it's obviously like important to account for that as well.
But it may be, like you say, that you're able to do something else. And also allow yourself the opportunity to eat. Because there's no point.
That's very important. Some people feel bad about eating just because they're not.
So then they end up not eating, and they end up becoming dehydrated anyway. So, well, you're not fasting, but you're also not eating an adequate amount. You're still taking your medications. Things are still kind of a little bit all over the place, and you still end up getting sick. Well, that's not really the point. Exactly. So, being respectful, fine, but also accepting that, we have been given this rukhsa or opportunity, or we've been told that it's okay. So we should do that and look after ourselves. Okay, well, we're nearly towards the end of our show. Now, one of the things that came through when we put out about this show and talking about medications was questions around over-the-counter things and kind of herbal medications and things that maybe your doctor doesn't know that you're taking, and how important these can be. So what are your thoughts on that, Ambreen?
I think that herbal and homeopathic products, I think we need to understand that they have a place and they have a role in treatment. And I mean, things like aspirin or salicylic acid, which is the chemical drug name, comes from a willow tree. So we need to understand that, you know, a lot of our medicines do come from plants and come from nature. But I think when it comes to herbal and homeopathic medications, we need to make sure that we are trying to do things based on evidence. So, for example, there are herbal and homeopathic medications that have been approved by the Medications or the Medicines Health Regulation Agency, or the MHRA as we know it. And they will have a THR label on the box or the bottle to show you that it's safe, it's efficacious, which means it works, and it's of good quality.
And that's the most important thing, isn't it? The good quality.
Exactly. So, and what you said is regarding to mentioning that to your doctor. I think it's so important because your doctor wants a holistic view, so a complete view of what you're taking. And from a pharmacy perspective, sometimes when you take a herbal or homeopathic medication, it might not be compatible with some of the other medications that you're taking. And I think that's actually one of our biggest worries. So it's very good to be open about those medications.
We don't always mention that. And that can like interact with certain medications, which can make it worse, put you at risk of side effects, and make you feel worse in general. So, and especially like with antibiotics and stuff like that, it's so important to mention these things. And I think because we think, oh, it's just a herbal medication, it might not slip and it might not be mentioned,
but it's still very important.
Very important.
Especially, I know the two that kind of come to my mind. If you're on blood thinners, and people tend to be on this thing called St. John's wort.
Pick me up.
Which they can just get from whatever kind of health food shops. And they don't tell anyone, but then suddenly all their, blood clotting, which is so important, is kind of all over the place. But also things like if you have something that you have every single day, I would say that's something to tell your GP. So, for example, a lot of people seem to really have grapefruit juice on a regular basis. And I am so scared of grapefruit juice because that interacts with so many medicines.
Warfarin especially.
With warfarin, okay.
Warfarin, with simvastatin.
With the statin, which is very common. And blood pressure tablets, I think, as well as amlodipine, possibly. So, if there's something that you are having on a very regular basis, please tell your GP. Because it may be that it's interacting, but also
especially grapefruit juice.
Especially grapefruit juice. Just stay away. It's very nice, but just stay away in general.
If you're taking
any medications. But I think what you mentioned about that good quality is so important as well.
As a pharmacist, we're always trying to do things based on evidence and making sure things are safe, efficacious, again, that they work, and of good quality. That's our main. It's like our.
Not just picking up herbs off a market stall, basically.
Also, sometimes you just don't know what's inside the herbal medication. And that can be dangerous. Like, you don't know what you're putting inside you.
So, really, because we're getting to the end of our show, guys. We've talked a lot about medicines today and things around medicines. And, our question was, are medicines enough to make us feel better? And I think we've talked a lot about other things around it. So maybe not just the medicines by themselves, but making sure that we're taking the medications appropriately, the ones that we need in the right way, and the ways in which we can do that. So thank you guys so much for coming to talk to us today. Any kind of take-home messages or one thing that, you want our listeners to go away and do if they haven't done it for a while? So for me, I think if your GP has been trying to contact you, I'm going to look at the camera. If your GP has been trying to contact you, asking you to do a medication review or your blood pressure, hopefully we've talked about how you can do that. Please do respond. It's so important. Any other take-home messages from you guys?
I think it's so important not to to take your medication appropriately, just how it's been prescribed. And if you have any problems, then talk about it. Tell us. Because if you don't tell us, we won't understand. And if you do tell us, we can at least tell you, but maybe you can do it this way, or maybe you can take it this way. We'll try to work with you. But tell us.
That was going to be my one.
So we're reiterating that. Just talk to
your
people.
Doctor, speak to your pharmacist, but also know that your pharmacist is very much very accessible.
Yeah.
I think most of the population live within a 5-minute walk of a pharmacy.
Wow.
So utilize the pharmacist and just know that we're here to give you medical advice as well, based on the medicines and based on our expertise. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope that was useful, and everyone goes away and has a look at their medications and what they can do. And we will see you next month, inshallah. And I hope everyone's having a brilliant Ramadan, and Eid Mubarak, well, early Eid Mubarak in a couple of weeks, because I won't speak to you before then. But see you next month. Assalamu alaikum.